So once you've finished drawing line work for your character, you then want to start filling it with colour, because that might have an effect on how you decide to weight the lines as well. So I've got my character roughly finished here. I tend to draw my character in layers because I like to animate the layers in After Effects. If you want to follow along, you can open up this file too. It's called Color Panel Start AI, and you can find that in the Color folder. Now, I've got the Essentials workspace open, but if I'm working on colour, I probably want to choose something like the Painting workspace. So if you choose Painting workspace, yours may look slightly different from mine. So if it does, just say Reset Painting, and this is what you should see. You should see the default painting setup, which has the lovely colour panel at the top. Notice now that when I scale up the colour panel, let's just close down swatches and colour guide and brushes for a second. And if I scale up the colour panel, notice I've now got a huge colour picker to choose colours from. Really intuitive way of working now. So I can do things like move over to my artwork, select an item, so I'll select this glove here, and make sure that I have fill at the front, and I can toggle that by hitting the X key on the keyboard. So I have fill at the front, and then I just choose a colour that I like. And then I can just drag over the colour picker until I find something I like, watching the colour update on the swatch. Now, unfortunately, the colour doesn't update on the hand, but you can use the swatch as reference, and when you have the right colour, just stop clicking and dragging. So, especially with my Wacom tablet, I love clicking and dragging over this spectrum and seeing that swatch update live over here. Really nice feature. Now, if we go to the wing menu, we can also show options in the colour panel. So if we click on Show Options, we get sliders coming up. And the default sliders that show up depend on the document that you're working in, obviously. If you're opening up an old document where someone was using HSB, chances are the HSB sliders will show up for you. And I like the HSB sliders because once I've chosen a colour, I find that adjusting things using hue, saturation and brightness is the easiest way for me to think. That's the way my mind thinks, in hue, saturation and brightness. However, you can always choose from other options. Here are the RGB sliders. Now, I work a lot in video and animation, so all the colours in video and animation are measured in RGB values from 0 to 255. So I can add or remove colours using my RGB sliders. Now, if I've selected a colour, I can also invert it here by choosing invert, and that's going to invert the colour for me. That's a handy little thing there. If you want to create complementary colours, you can just invert the colour. Or indeed, you can just say complement the colour. And in some cases, that will do exactly the same, but in others, it will choose a complementary colour. So if we go to CMYK, for example, and CMYK is more designed for you print folks out there, and I select a colour, choosing complement may be different from invert, you see? So depending on the colour system you use, invert and complement may do different things. Now, if you're working on artwork like this and you want to save colours, you can use the colour panel to do that without having the swatches panel open. We can come down here and say create new swatch, and that's going to create a new swatch, and it defaults to using the RGB values for the colour, even though I've got CMYK selected. But if I choose, I can change to CMYK and just give it a name. So we could call it blah, 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 and click OK, and we now have a name for the colour. Now, if I think I'm going to use that colour on other elements in my design, it makes sense to make that a global colour. And the reason for that is when I make changes to a global colour, it will update all of the instances. So let's find a nice colour for the gloves. I'm not that keen on the colour that we have at the moment. So I'm using this swatch as reference now. And I'm actually going to go to HSB because I said I find that easier. That suits my way of thinking a little bit better. So we're going to choose a dark kind of orange colour, and we're going to call it dark orange. Okay, and we're going to make it global, and we're going to click OK. So once I've done that, I could select my other glove, this one here, and if I move over to this element here, what I could do is get the eyedropper tool and just click on that and it will colour this glove exactly the same as that glove. So if I go into my swatches and double click that swatch and say the editor working on the piece has asked me to brighten up the colour of the gloves, then because the gloves are both using the same swatch, when I click on preview, it updates everything that uses that colour. So a good idea to choose global colours when you're saving a colour, if you're going to be using it for more than one element in your design. So let's close up swatches and let's have another look at the colour panel. Now you have options for fill and stroke. If I hit the X key on the keyboard, that toggles between the two. And you'll see that when I toggle to the stroke, it's giving me HSB sliders. But when I toggle to the fill, we have this single display, which is allowing me just to adjust the tint. So when I have a colour selected, it actually allows me just to adjust the tint of the colour so I can fade it out or make it stronger. I also have a couple of options down here for process colours. We'll find out more about process colours in another tutorial. And also to click to convert a tint to an RGB value. So say I tint it at 50%, but I want to know the RGB values of this colour. If I click on RGB, that will convert it for me. So if I change the colours up here, it will only change the colours for the selection. However, if I go into the watches and double click the watch itself, it will adjust the colour for everything that uses that particular colour swatch. So very easy for me just to reset that setting. So what other things can we do with the colour panel? Well, let's just colour some of our artwork. So what we're going to do is select the hat layer. And what I'm going to do is open up my colour picker. And I really love this colour picker being so big. It just allows me to really easily go through and choose my colours interactively. So I'm going to choose a dark purple for that. Now you'll notice if we have a look at our layers panel, so I'm just going to open up that the hat is actually behind the face. So I now need to select my head layer and colour that. Now just be aware that within my head layer I have lots of different paths. So what I need to do is make sure that I select just the face path. And again, let's go in here and choose some colours. So let's make our layers a bit smaller and we'll choose a skin tone using the colour picker as a rough guide to make selections. And then using the sliders just to tweak those selections and get the colour that I really want. Again, once I get the colour I want, go to here and choose Create New Swatch. We'll make it a global colour and we'll call it Flesh. Okay, so that's our flesh colour for this character. Once I have my flesh colour, I can select items and colour them using that colour. So again, if I select the jaw here, and then choose my flesh colour from swatches, I can apply it. And I just go through applying colour to the various different elements in my design. So let's colour the dress as well. And the legs. Okay, the arms slightly different. I haven't got an actual fill on the arms there. So we're going to have a look at some different techniques to colour some of the other elements in the design that maybe don't have a closed shape, so it's not easy to apply a colour to it. But that's a little run through of the colour panel. Have a play with it. Have a play with this lovely, huge colour picker that we now have access to and some of the options in here. Incidentally, if you're working for the web, there are also web-safe RGB values, which you can use. And again, you get a really lovely web-safe RGB colour picker with that. Or you can choose grayscale values. So a little bit about the colour panel.